Hello and welcome to Called Bank Sports. This is a pre-recorded episode where we filmed it, at the beginning of May before the playoffs started. So we did this just to celebrate the Jazz win before it even happened. Okay, no, this is not live per se, but the Bucks won the championship this week, much to the dismay of Suns fans, and Dale was kind of disappointed on that a bit more than me. I was really happy to see Giannis win. I think obviously we both would have rather seen Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, and Rudy Gobert hosting that trophy, but there's always next year. So in this episode, we wanted to talk a bit about the Bucks and kind of what the Jazz can learn from them, and what we kind of learned about winning a title as a whole. So the Bucks this last offseason made a really big signing. They were able to re-sign Giannis for a 5-year Supermax deal, which I don't think anyone was really expecting. I think everyone was expecting him to enter free agency this upcoming offseason and then possibly re-sign with the Bucks. But that signing was really big for them. And then they were also able to trade with the Pelicans to get Drew Holiday, make a trade with the Rockets to get PJ Tucker. And they attempted to get Bogdan Bogdanovic from the Kings, but that ended up not going through due to various NBA rule violations. But I really don't think that's the whole story to tell on how they won this championship. And I'm not trying to take anything away from the Bucks in this discussion. But there is the real discussion of if KD's foot wasn't on the line.
Yeah.
If you don't have Kyrie Irving and if you don't have James Harden both get injured in the same playoff series, since that game went to overtime, that series went to overtime in Game 7. Like, that was a close series when the Nets did not have two of their top 3 players. And so how much of winning a title is luck just overall? And Dale, a while back, me and you were just chatting on our own, and we talked about asterisks next to NBA championships. And I just kind of wanted to get your feel on which championships have asterisks.
And I'm sure a lot of you have seen different things have been going on. I know someone made a list of every championship back to the first NBA championship and put an asterisk next to every single one. I feel like some of those are definitely like a little bit of a stretch. I went back into the 90s, and it's tough for some of Jordan's championships to find one, but others he has them. So I feel like most champions, they're like things have to go right that are out of your control. Every year there's going to be, 5, 6 teams who are really in the running, feel like they have the shot, and they think that they can win a championship this year, and everything has to go right for that team. Like it's rare where everything is smooth sailing for all the teams and it's just whoever is the best team, I feel like. And so the Bucks, we saw them the past 2-3 seasons being the best team in the league. And then just something went wrong in the playoffs. Last year, Giannis got hurt and they got beat in the first round, which was rough, and everyone thought that was game over. And so kind of what I learned about this asterisk thing is don't get too caught up in this year. Because I know a lot of Bucks fans got too caught up in last year when they lost in the first round, and they were thinking, "Crap, let's blow this up." And I'm obviously not get rid of Giannis, but what are we doing? Will this even win? There was a lot of talk. Can Giannis be the best player on a championship team? I remember I was on a Zoom call with other YouTube NBA creators, and all of them were talking about how there's no way Giannis can be the best player on a championship team. And here a couple months later, he is the best player on a championship team. So I feel like it's easy to get too caught up in that moment. But I feel like watching how the Bucks did it is a perfect roadmap to kind of follow for the Jazz. And the tough part is you have to accept that sometimes there's just going to be a better super team in the way. And if they don't get injured, or if they don't get a fluke loss to another team, sometimes that's just how it works, but your chance will come up eventually.
Yeah.
Is kind of how the Bucks went for it, and it worked this year. Are they going to be able to repeat? That's a whole nother question. I think that's a really tough chance that happens.
No, I really agree with you on that whole repeat thing. And just in general, you need to position yourself to have a chance, which I feel like the Jazz did this year. They ended up getting a really terrible matchup for them in the Clippers, which I really think was probably the worst matchup they could have got. We were all scared of the Lakers, and I mean, assuming the Jazz are going to make at least some changes, and the Lakers are going to make some changes, we're never going to know how the Jazz would have fared against this Lakers team. Like they played 3 times, all 3 times the Lakers were missing key players, the Jazz were missing key players in some of them. Like we will never know what would have happened there, but we do know that the Clippers were deep enough and built in a way that they were able to beat the Jazz. Coupled with Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley both being injured, that really hurt the Jazz's opportunities to be able to get past it. So that's the real question. Like the Jazz look at it and you're like, well, if we had Denver in the second round, I think the Jazz are able to win that series. So if the Suns get the Clippers in the second round when Kawhi Leonard is, available for, I think 3 of those games, then what happens to the Suns? Like so much of the NBA championships are those coin flips, those asterisks per se. And there are some hills I will die on asterisks that are bigger than others. Like the Suns were a really good team this year, but they had an asterisk in every single series up until the finals. And it looked like Giannis wasn't going to play the finals, just like everyone thought, which was a really big asterisk. So as Jazz fans, this year was kind of discouraging after the Clippers loss, because it's like, well, if we can't beat the Clippers, if we can't keep a 25-point lead, what's going on here? Like, what are the Jazz going to do? How are they going to win? But taking a step back and saying, well, everyone wondered how the Bucks were going to win these last couple of years. Everyone thought that the Bucks had no shot. They're like, I mean, I remember you and I were discussing at the beginning of the playoffs. We're like, yeah, the Bucks are good, but dang, like we could see this going 7 and we could see them losing to the Heat. I mean, one sweep later,
yeah,
and like they end up beating the Nets, which again, you predicted, I didn't, and they did definitely get some help from Ben Simmons. And because of that, they got to play the Atlanta Hawks in the conference championship. But overall, asterisks are going to happen, and you're going to need to make moves like the Bucks did, and they made some big moves, and we can discuss how that translates to Utah. But it's definitely showing how it's right place, right time. I don't think we're going to see a lot more teams in the NBA like the Golden State Warriors or like the Miami Heat. I think that the talent level has just skyrocketed. And the fact that you said every year there's like 4 to 6 teams that think they have a chance. Well, this year, I'd argue there was 10 to 12. And maybe that's a bit on the high end. But next year, it's the same thing. And the fact that now we're looking at like a third of the league thinks they can win, and that's not absurd, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, and to go with it, like we keep talking about the changes the Bucks made. I know probably by the time you get to this point in the video, there's probably going to be someone in the comment section who points out, hey, last year in the bubble, we blew that lead against the Nuggets and we lost the series. This year in Game 6, we had a lead and we blew it. And so we're not saying, hey, the Jazz roster was perfect, we just need to wait for things to line up, because the Bucks didn't do that either. The Bucks looked and said, hey, we really don't have the strongest point guard. We need to go get a point guard. And then they went and so they got Drew Holiday, and he wasn't like the greatest scorer in the world, but his defense really changed the Suns series. I didn't watch most of the Bucks series, so I can't comment too much on how Drew Holiday impacted most of the other series, but in the championship, Drew Holiday made a huge difference. And in Game 7 with the Nets, they picked up PJ Tucker mid-season. Game 7 with the Nets, PJ Tucker did an amazing job at making it tough for Kevin Durant. Obviously, Kevin Durant did what he did and was incredible, but without PJ Tucker, I don't know if the Bucks even make it to the conference finals. So This is something that, like, we know the Jazz, we don't trade draft picks very often, which I know there's a weird situation where it's tough for us to trade draft picks right now.
Right now, we can't trade draft picks. I don't know the whole story, but it's something to do with Memphis still having our pick from the Mike Conley trade. and they have to. I think we can after this draft, but yeah, right now we can't.
Yes. So historically we haven't.
Yeah, no,
But
totally.
that's something, and the Bucks didn't go crazy with it, but they did throw some draft picks into trades. And historically, we don't get midseason pickups. Jordan Clarkson was an exception because that was just too good of a deal to pass. But the Bucks looked and saw PJ Tucker, and they went after him, and that made a huge deal. So I feel like I know midseason trades a lot of times they don't end up as good as we wish as we think they could.
Yeah.
And making win now risky moves, trading draft picks or other assets. It's always scary to do that, but I feel like the Jazz don't need to go all in on any of those moves. Just like the Bucks didn't go crazy and make 4 or 5 different deals, but if we go out and make strategic moves, whether it's offseason or midseason, even if it's giving away someone like Joe Ingles, who I would hate to see leave, but he's going to start exiting his prime soon, and
he has a lot of value. Like
we need to extend, and he's a shooter, so we can get something for him, and he's on a decent contract, so we can make the money work. So I feel like the Jazz need to be looking at changes. They don't need to reset the roster, and we don't need to feel like this whole shooting threes all the time and being the best offense in the league just isn't working for us. We just need to change the personnel a little bit to make that be a championship team rather than just a regular season team.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not getting my hopes up as a Jazz fan. I don't think they're going to get the 1 seed again this year. Getting the 1 seed in back-to-back years isn't nearly as hard as repeating as champion, but it's definitely difficult and it's up there. And I was listening to a podcast that was going through each team in the NBA and saying whether or not they'd have a worse season than last year. And they went through the top 6 teams in the West, from the Jazz to Portland, and said that they thought they'd have a worse season than last year because the West is just so deep. And then
Warriors
you get to the Lakers.
Back.
Yeah, the Warriors are coming back. Then you get to the Lakers and it's like, well, they were riddled by so many injuries that they have to do somewhat better. Like Memphis is young, so they'll improve. Spurs will probably do like the same. And so, yeah, the West is going to be really competitive this year. And frankly, my hopes as a Jazz fan is that they get home court advantage in the first round. Like that's pretty much the hope that I have. And I think the hope that we should have for the future, since they're definitely capable of getting the 1 seed again, but I don't think it's going to happen. So yeah, if we as Jazz fans, like if you want to be successful in the playoffs, I mean, remember the teams that made it, well, the Bucks, the first year that they didn't have the best record in the NBA in the last 3 years is the year they won it. So how important really is that regular season success?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I feel like it was because the Bucks were willing to experiment is my take on that. Like they were like, okay, we can lose a few games here. As long as we keep that home court advantage, we'll be ready for the playoffs. Really interesting stuff, though. I'm curious to see what the Jazz do. We haven't really talked about the draft, which is this week, and that's because the Jazz have a 38th overall pick. And Nate and I, we were talking before this, and we would just kind of want to see the Jazz let that pick go, turn it into a future pick, or I don't know if they have a specific trade deal ready for anything, but that's something to throw into a trade. Because on draft day we could trade our pick, and that's the only pick we have to trade right now. So I would like to see something like that happen, or trade it for future picks that we could throw into trades later.
And the main reason behind this is because the Jazz are already going to be in the luxury tax no matter what happens. And if they end up signing Conley again or doing a sign and trade, they're going to bite the bullet on. I think I was seeing somewhere that if the Jazz end up adding $25 million more to their roster, whether it's via signing Conley or a sign and trade, they're going to have to pay $65 million to the league.
Ouch.
And that's crazy to me. Like you'll look at it and their roster is probably going to be around somewhere between 150, 160 million. So the fact that they're going to be paying like 40% of that additional to the league is absolutely insane to me. So yeah, even though the 30th pick obviously is the cheapest guaranteed contract, it's still a guaranteed contract. And once you kind of get up there, it's a crapshoot. So if you were able to somehow trade back down to like the low 30s, or even the mid 30s, chances are the Jazz can get who they would want. And even then, whoever they get isn't going to be a contributor right now. So that's the draft just really isn't that big for the Jazz. The only thing that we could maybe see is them doing a package where all of a sudden Joe Ingles and that 30th pick are, going to Charlotte for Gordon Hayward. No. So like that's what we could end up seeing as a package on draft night. But overall, I'm expecting the Jazz to trade that, and we can just take a look at some second round picks and and take a flyer on a guy.
Yeah, and I think there's good talent in this draft. I remember this draft has been talked about for about 3 years now.
Yeah,
about how this one was supposed to be a really, really good draft. So here it is. So I don't know if the Jazz will be able to benefit much from that, but it'll be fun to watch this draft grow up. And if we do get a second round pick, we may get someone who's a solid 6th or 7th man, or maybe even we get a gem who can be a regular starter in the league.
So here's my hot take that is not Jazz related. But honestly, the more that I've heard about Cade Cunningham and done an in-depth statistical analysis, and that's just listening to some other people talk about him, but like, not to get too deep, I do not expect Cade Cunningham to be that good. Like,
interesting.
I think he's going to be like an Andrew Wiggins type first round pick. So that's my hot take. Anyone who's listened this long, can come at me with that later. But I don't expect to see him be that successful. So honestly, I think Detroit should probably look to move down a spot or two. And if they're able to shift that to someone who wants it and move down a spot or two and pick up someone who's probably should be the number one pick, but it seems like Cade Cunningham is going to end up there no matter what. So
if that's true and Detroit thinks that, then they should 100% move it, because everyone thinks Cade is the next Luka. So
yeah,
they could get a lot for that pick.
No, they definitely could. I do not expect to see. There's a lot to it, but we'll get to what everyone's been waiting for. The thing that I forgot to tease at the beginning of the episode, I'm pretty sure. But we have the winner to the NBA bracket challenge, and the winner is a tie. So I'm sorry, that's terrible. So Know My Flow and C Chivers tied on their brackets. So we're going to be reaching out to them via email to get that squared away. And we will pin the winner to the top of this comment section when we end up getting a winner. So they're going to get a Jazz Team Store gift card. Whoever wins will get a Jazz Team Store gift card. And we plan on doing this next year too. So we're going to keep doing these NBA bracket challenges. And we also would love to do a giveaway when we get to 1,000 subscribers. So please, if you haven't subscribed, do that, leave a like, leave a comment, and go Jazz.